ATF has to issue a rule to basically close what we call the gun show loophole.
President Biden is now proposing a major plan for gun reform that could close the gun show loophole.
In point of fact, there are tens of thousands of transactions a year where guns are bought and sold outside of the background check system, not by licensed firearm dealers in brick and mortar stores, but at gun shows, flea markets.
What is the gun show loophole? Everyone's asking lately because of the Safer Communities Act. Well, it's kind of nonsense because it doesn't exist. Kind of fun having my own channel now because I can talk a little bit here about gun law issues more so than I can on TFB TV. I'm a gun guy, I'm a lawyer. It just works. So help me out, hit that subscribe button or I will sue you for loss of consortium. Regular viewers know I don't really like to talk about politics here. Instead, we're talking about what legally the gun show loophole is. And that is absolutely nothing. If there's one thing you take away from this video, understand that whether or not a firearm transaction happens at a gun show makes it no different than any other firearm transaction ever anywhere else. For example, buyer Bill walks into his local gun store, the Neutral Ground Gun Company in New Orleans, Louisiana. Great store, I own it. Bill buys a firearm. The gun shop has to complete an FBI background check known as a NICS check on Bill buyer. Bill has to fill out a federal form 4473 called a background check form, in addition to whatever state requirements there are, like waiting periods or additional background checks, firearm ID card checks, concealed handgun permit checks, whatever. So federal law and state laws have to be met. Now think about the exact same transaction. The only difference, Bill walks into a gun show and sees Neutral Ground Gun Company's table, a dealer selling a gun that he wants, and he buys it. What changes about that transaction if he buys it at the show? If it happens at the gun show, literally nothing changes. All the same paperwork has to be done, all the same background checks, waiting period, federal, state requirements, literally every single thing is identical about the transaction and the background check, whether or not it happens at a gun show or at a gun store, whatever. Now at that point, you might fairly be asking, this lawyer's hiding something, what's the point? I mean, everybody says gun show loophole, it can't be totally made up. Well, it kind of is. At best, it's a misnomer for regular, everyday, person-to-person individual sales. That's Bill meeting his neighbor, legal seller Sam, to buy a gun from Sam's personal collection. Sam and Bill, they're just both regular guys without criminal records. They can legally own a gun. Neither of them is a gun dealer. It's Bill selling Sam one of his personal guns or vice versa. There's no background check requirement because it's a private sale. But again, it doesn't matter if that's at a gun show or not. It could happen at a gun show. It could happen in Bill's living room or Sam's living room. It's just two regular dudes and a private transaction. Doesn't matter if it happens at a gun show or not. There's no background check required by federal law. One more quick example to try to drive the point home. I go into JCPenney. I buy a pair of jean shorts. I'm a Florida man. What can I say? I'm paying sales tax for those jean shorts. But that weekend I go to a flea market. JCPenney is there. They've got jean shorts. I buy another pair of jean shorts and I still pay sales tax on them. But my neighbor, Sam, is selling his personal jean shorts at the flea market too, or at a yard sale, or his truck on the side of the road. I'm not paying him sales tax either way. It's not like a flea market sales tax loophole. It's just the way things are because he's not a merchant. He's just a private seller selling his jean shorts as the founding fathers intended. That's why people talk about closing the gun show loophole. It sounds like a good thing if you don't know what the gun show loophole is or isn't, because it doesn't exist. Ooh, we should close up that nasty gun show loophole. Close it before it gets infected. Gun show loophole is inaccurate because people use it because it sounds salacious. Like no one does a background check ever at a gun show, like it's Tatooine or something. It's just flat out false. Perhaps your perception would change if instead of calling it closing a gun show loophole, we said ending person-to-person firearm sales. If that's something you think is okay, fair enough. You can probably guess how I feel about that issue personally. But if you think that you inherit a gun or you buy it from a neighbor or whatever, you need to have a federal background check performed no matter what, then so be it. Let's just call it what it is, not what it's not. And it is not a gun show loophole. Now, this has come up in the context of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. It passed in March, and now there's a push to broaden the definition of who qualifies as a dealer. Before we get into that definition, let me tell you why the announcement from the White House itself could potentially be misleading. So the press release from the White House says, since 1994, federal laws required federally licensed firearm dealers, known as FFLs, to run background checks prior to selling or transferring a weapon. These background checks have helped keep guns out of the hands of more than 3 million felons, convicted domestic abusers, and other dangerous individuals. However, this is the important part, despite the law, individuals who should be licensed dealers have refused to obtain a license, skirting the background check requirement. Let me tell you why this is misleading, because people who don't qualify as gun dealers don't refuse to get a federal firearms license and register as a dealer. They just can't get them. They're typically not allowed to get federal firearms licenses unless they're really dealers. In other words, the government isn't just handing out FFLs to anyone who applies for them. The government wants you to prove that you are a legitimate business if you want an FFL. How do I know? I've had 2 FFLs. And here's the story about the time I didn't get one. A few years ago, a couple of ATF agents came to my law firm unannounced. Kind of a dick move, but you know, it's the ATF, so whatever. And they asked me why I bought 90 guns the prior year. Well, I didn't buy 90 guns, but I didn't have my federal firearms license back then. So anytime a manufacturer sent me a gun to review, I had to do a background check on every single gun I reviewed for TFB TV. And then I would send it back whenever I was done, or I'd buy it from that manufacturer. You still got to do the background check. The ATF looks at it like it's a purchase. They suggested to me, hey man, maybe you aren't really a private person, but someone who's in the gun business and you need to get an FFL. I said, great, wonderful. I don't have to do any more background checks or pay any transfer fees to my local dealer. I can just have guns sent straight to my house or my office. I only have to do about 60 seconds of paperwork for each gun in the bound book that comes in. Great. Where do I sign up? So I apply for an FFL the same day. The ATF calls me back the next week and they say they are denying my FFL because I don't own a storefront and because my house is in a school zone. Now, have I bought, sold, transferred those guns, sometimes even for a profit? Sure, but I was denied my FFL. I didn't refuse to get one like the White House press release suggests. So if you're one of those people who thinks all private gun sales should have background checks, I've got bad news for you in terms of this act. It doesn't set out to do that. Instead, it only broadens the definition of what a dealer is. Under 18 U.S. Code Section 921, a dealer is any person engaged in the business of selling firearms at wholesale or retail. Engaged in the business is defined as a person who devotes time, attention, and labor to dealing in firearms as a regular course of trade or business with the principal objective of livelihood and profit through the repetitive purchase and resale of firearms. This definition excluded occasional sales for hobby or collecting purposes. Now, the new definition that's going to be proposed by, I think, the AG for the Safer Communities Act is to define as dealers all persons who intend to predominantly earn a profit from dealing in firearms, eliminating the livelihood part. It still excludes persons who make occasional sales, exchanges, purchases of firearms for the enhancement of a personal collection or for a hobby, or someone who sells all or part of his personal collection of firearms, basically like your normal person-to-person sale. Really, there's not a huge difference between the old and the new definition. How many people out there are buying and selling guns predominantly to make a profit, but not as a livelihood? Remember, livelihood's the part they're cutting out. In other words, this new definition sounds like it'll require a very, 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 very small number of people who didn't have to register as gun dealers to now register. And my guess is that those people might want FFLs anyways, or maybe even applied for FFLs in the past but were rejected. It doesn't seem like much is going to change, and the main point of this video is to tell you that the gun show loophole doesn't exist, totally fictional, And I also wanted to, while we're here, strangely explain the limited scope of this new rule, which will require you to get an FFL if you sell guns predominantly to make a profit versus as a livelihood. So what do you all think about this new proposed definition? Is it intended to be a slippery slope to eventually limit or completely exclude private sales? Or will it instead have the unintended consequence of allowing more people who couldn't get FFLs before the ability to get them now? Sound off in the comments. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't worry, I'm going to be bringing you more legal analysis of several other gun issues, so make sure you subscribe and stay tuned. Take care, guys.